several occasions when people from, especially from Guatemala, showed up and began their discussions and returned home. As you remember, Guatemala was a quagmire of murder and killing of indigenous peoples. And even today, it hasn't really cleared itself. It still goes on. Thousands, hundreds of thousands of people were murdered during that time. And you can imagine what was going to happen to delegates that went to the UN and returned home. And further on, down in Peru, there were several delegates where whole families were murdered on return from the UN. Yeah, there were delegates, indigenous delegates in South America, Peru, who were returning from they work at the United Nations under the Working Group for Indigenous Populations, and were murdered, and whole families were murdered. I mean, I believe the number was somewhere around 18. And then further over there in the islands, people returning back to the islands were murdered there as well. So this is a very difficult battle, and it's not new to indigenous people to be murdered. I mean, this is not new. We've been going through 500 years of this. You're not talking to somebody that doesn't understand what it is or why. It's just the reality that indigenous people live in. And the issue has always been land, and the issue has always been resources. And I just say to all indigenous people, that as long as you have land and resources, you're going to have to fight. And that's the way it's going to be. Well, the World Trade Organization, which is supposedly trying to come to some kind of conclusion of how to work together over this issue of trade, has failed in all of their attempts, and has failed the last time, and it's going to fail again, I understand. And what's occurring now is unilateral trade going on with people like the EU and Iceland, and they're just doing things separately because they're kind of given up on the World Trade Organization as something that's able to control trade. In the meantime, the World Bank, which is an arm of the hegemony of the United States economy, is also very active and has always been active in these arenas of extraction, in dam building, and supporting the projects and the ideas of states rather than indigenous people. Never was really intended to support indigenous peoples. So any of these activities that you see them involved in, which they are indeed in particular in carbon trading very much, because people want to continue to do what they're going to do. I mean, it's as simple as that. And they're going to use every form that they have, and they have all the marbles. If you're going to play in the economy field, you don't have a chance. But if you move to the moral side of it, we're the leaders. One of the problems that indigenous people face in these challenges that we've had over the 31 years of moving our agenda forward as peoples and human rights and so forth is the opposition. And the opposition comes from powerful states and comes from powerful corporations who have...
And UN agencies.
And UN agencies. Depending on who's there at what time, things can change. It's very fluid over there, but what doesn't change for indigenous peoples is the persecution and the selective persecution that takes place over media and over statements made, that these people are independent, or they don't represent anybody, which indeed they are the leaders, in fact, willing to get out there and say something that everybody feels. And the result of that is they draw fire, heavy fire, and character assassination of any kind will occur, does occur, and will continue to occur. And so people who receive these or hear these kinds of insinuations or styles of attack, I would say, by corporations and governments.
And UN agencies.
And United Nations agencies, whoever, they should understand and comprehend the circumstance and understand that these are quite valiant people who are courageous with an intent for the goodwill of the earth.